So if you've ever spent any time hanging around film blogs, then you've probably come across the phrase, "style is substance." I don't have any idea who coined it, but whenever I hear it, I often think of one filmmaker, Saul Bass. You may not know his name, but you'd no doubt recognize his iconic work. For over 50 years, he worked as a graphic designer on ad campaigns and eventually became an on-set visual consultant, and had the pleasure of working with names like Hitchcock, Scorsese, Kubrick, and Preminger. Or maybe they had the pleasure of working with him. Bass arrived in the mid-1950s Hollywood that was going through incredible change, and his work, particularly his modernist-leaning title sequences, helped spur that change forward. Despite the fact that true title sequences aren't really something that most movies carry today, the ones that do feature them are almost always in debt to Bass's style and philosophy, and it's that philosophy that I want to take a minute to explore.
I have felt for some time that the audience involvement with a film should really begin with the very first frame. You have to remember that until then, titles have tended to be lists of dull credits, mostly ignored or used for popcorn time. So there seemed to be a real opportunity to use titles in a new way, to actually create a climate for the story that was about to unfold. You'll remember that the film was about drug addiction, and the symbol, that is the arm, in its jagged form, expressed the jarring, disjointed existence of the drug addict. Now, to the extent that it was an accurate and telling synthesis of the film and the ad campaign, these same qualities came with it into the theater. And of course, with the addition of motion and sound, really came alive and set up the mood and the texture of the film.
What's important isn't just that his sequences are creative and visually interesting, it's that, if you think about it, what you're seeing is actually a short version of the film you're about to watch, almost always broken down to one or two simple visualized ideas. So a wild romp about a Vegas heist is boiled down to this. A turn-of-the-century high society romance like this. Or a courtroom drama backed by a jazz soundtrack like this. But that distinct abstract style of his isn't just limited to summarizing plot. Where his sequences often succeed the most are in symbolizing pure emotions. So okay, take away the music track. How can you prep the audience for a tragedy in a purely visual way? Well, Bass would answer with something like this. And if you asked him to portray terror, he'd give you this. Again, take away the music. That idea is still completely there. Now, if there's a lesson in Bass's style, then that lesson, very simply, is that you can do this with anything. You can think outside of and way past whatever box there is. There are no rules. You can use stock footage and sound bites. If you've got a couple cats hanging around, grab a camera and substitute them in for the main characters. Or you can just rip the screen apart. And if you're ever grasping for an idea, try two things. The first, play with primary colors, especially red. Like every great filmmaker, Bass was fairly obsessed with it. Just see for yourself. As for the other thing, well, everybody sure loves animation.
It's a mad, mad, mad...
But that leads us to a much more foundational point. And although it's not a magical or life-changing rule of thumb, it's still a vital one. Do less for more. On the simpler side, that translates to the fact that just because you can use anything doesn't mean that you should use everything. Certain sequences can remain simplistic and be completely effective. On the more complex side, you'll see that this is a rule that isn't at all limited to title sequences. You may have heard this before, that rumors abound about who actually directed the famous shower scene in Psycho, either Alfred Hitchcock or Saul Bass, who was credited as a pictorial consultant. Regardless of whoever did the deed, Bass's fingerprints are all over the sequence. The combination of extreme close-ups, the fast, tight editing, the sound, they all lead you to believe that you're seeing something that you're actually not. I'm sure you've seen this before, but take this down to a frame-by-frame level. You're not actually seeing much of anything. Besides 4 individual frames, you never once see the knife actually strike Marion. You don't see the actual murder. But you think you do. You feel it because of the way the images and the sound are all put together. And the reason that works, the reason people still talk about that scene today, is because of that principle. That principle which was at the core of Saul Bass's work, of saying so much with so little, of turning substance into style. Because as we all know, style is substance.
My work on titles was a marvelous opportunity to learn about filmmaking. I think I touched about every aspect of the process, both creative and technical, and I worked with many wonderful people. But there are always new challenges, new mountains to climb. I've since directed interior sequences for other people's features, short films, commercials, my own feature. But it's all film. Film is wonderful. I'm a filmmaker, and I intend to continue making films of all kinds, short or long, because there's nothing I'd rather do.
Such are the facts of life. You want to know the facts of life?
I'm gonna teach the facts of life to you.
Now, concerning the birds and bees inhabiting all those trees.